Happy holidays. I'm the Frank Friar. Let's get frank about it. If you like what I'm doing here on this YouTube channel, please make sure to click that little subscribe button and then that little bell icon. That way you stay up to date with everything I'm doing in the land of Carmel. Also, if you want to keep the conversation going, leave a little comment down below. I always like to engage people with the comments. Or you can head over to my Twitter page at Carmelite Nick, or over at my Facebook page, The Real Frank Friar. These are two great resources to let me know what's going on and any questions, comments, or concerns you may have with what I'm doing here in the land of Carmel. Thanks again and enjoy the video. Well, I started this video with a little happy holidays, but before I get to what I mean by that sort of little introduction, I'm just going to name things out. Yes, my eye's a little messed up right now. When you work in two schools, you catch certain things, and I think I got a little bit of the old conjunctivitis, which is pink eye. So if you have any remedies or etc., leave them down below for me. If not, I'm going to try not to spread the contagion, so don't worry. I don't think you can catch it through video, but either way. Now, with that sort of out of the way, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I mean by happy holiday this week. This week in the United States of America, where I am from, where I was born, and the country of, my birth, we had President's Day this past Monday. And it's a day where we honor, our presidents, we think about our presidents, etc., but it's really based on the birthdays of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, two very important figures in the life of the United States. Very noble men, not perfect men, but good men striving for virtue and etc. And one of the things I want to talk about a little bit today, and you may not be aware of this, but I'm a big history nut. I studied history. My first degree is Bachelor's of Science in History. And, I tend to teach social studies back in the day, and along with history and things like that. So a little bit of a history wonk, history nut, etc. in certain time periods of human history. And recently I've been really studying up and reading about a very important Catholic person inside the United States of America. Now, he was not a particular president, but he played a very important aspect in the life of the Catholic Church here in the United States. And I think he is a man that I would hope would rise back up to the surface of our history, at least here in the States, if not the world, and help us to think about where we are at now as a people, maybe as United States citizens, but also as Catholics, as we struggle with so many conflicts that are rising within the church right now. There's nothing really new about that. People within the church have been fighting for generation after generation. There's, Cain and Abel. Hopefully it never gets that bad again, but there's always this tension amongst the brothers. So that person is Charles Carroll. And this is one of the particular books I've been reading. I found it just a wonderful little gem, splicing some great insights from this man. And Charles Carroll, sometimes called Charles Carroll of Carrollton, was from a very Irish, British family, but Irish descent, so there were certain things that were restricted from his family because of their Catholic identity, being Irish. They were able to get a good stretch of land in the Maryland, what would become the state of Maryland, and became quite wealthy from that. But during Charles' time, he was sent away. He studied in Europe under the French Jesuits and then went to England and studied some time there. For a good chunk of his studies, he was considered as illegitimate. I won't say the B word, on the video, but he was considered illegitimate. But over time, his father, who was known as Charles Carroll of Annapolis, accepted him and would allow all the sort of things as an inheritance we passed on, etc. And when Charles Carroll of Carrollton, the figure we're talking about here, came back to the States, he played a very pivotal role in the American Revolution and the founding of what would become the United States of America. Now, why is he so important? Well, he is the only Catholic signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he is the last living signer. So out of all the people that signed, he was the last one to die. I believe it was around 1830, give or take a couple years either way. So he was up into his 90s, so he lived to be quite an old man, outlasting many of his children, which is really a horrendous fate. I come to believe over my years of working with people that have lost children. But he had very keen insights on the importance of a republic, on the dangers of a democracy, the importance of the structure of government, the moral life of the people. And this is a man, mind you. He helped to shape the structure of the Senate of the United States of America, based off of some of his influence in the state structure within the colony of Maryland. And Maryland was supposed to be a place for the Catholics and etc., but there was this thing called the Glorious Revolution. You can Google that, and turned a lot of things over, and a lot of anti-Catholic laws got put into place. Many people may not know this, but Catholics have not been well received in this particular country for a good stretch of time. Even many of the Irish were indentured servants and etc. So people sort of forget that aspect about history. One of the reasons the Knights of Columbus came about was because of the issues of persecution, using sort of a strong word, but going on in Connecticut, and Catholic men coming together to aid and aid families of men that were injured and hurt and couldn't work well, and etc. So he was well aware of the human condition, and he fought for a republic-style government, the ones which people are voting upon their representatives and etc. And even though he himself couldn't vote, even though he himself couldn't hold office, because in that particular colony at the time, these laws were in place that were keeping Catholics from holding these things because there's issues about where their loyalty would lie. Would they be with the Pope, or would they be in the States, and etc., or what would become the States. But there's one particular quote I want to give you because I think is very telling for our time now here in the States, particularly here in the Western world. And this is from a particular letter to a person in his life in relationship to what to do about the British now that, there's a lot of revolts going on here in the States and we're kicking the Brits out, and what to do with their land, and how to treat some of the British residents that still remain here and identify themselves as British and etc. So this is the quote. Ready? Quote. "The advocates of confiscation extend that there are no innocent or unoffending British subjects with respect to us, that the guilt of the whole nation is communicated to every individual of it," end quote. Now he's talking about confiscation of their land, being, the revolution, and pushing out of certain forces, and there was some high-powered British officials in governmental positions that were doing some very rough things. So there was a very anti-British sentiment that was occurring. He was talking about confiscation of land. But he was arguing against people that were saying, well, now that we've sort of won the day and tides are turning and we're taking things over and etc., take all the British land. Take all the British land. Take it all. They're the enemies of the people. They did all these things against us and etc. And he is warning very much against that. And he had such a sharp way of putting it, that there's no such thing as an innocent or unoffending British person. So he's putting forward their argument and how you don't see the people as individual. And he talks about how foolish that idea is. That to say, well, because there is an attachment with this particular group, and in this regard he's talking about their particular government and being a British national, etc. Because you're part of that government, you're as rough as our ideas about who those people are. So even though you're an individual person, you're still culpable for everything of that particular group. And are we not in those times once again? Are we not dealing with those same problems and issues once again? Your people did this back many, 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 many years ago, so you are just as responsible for them. I get that a lot, being a white guy. You have certain privileges and things like that. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't, I don't know. I'm not from a wealthy area, not from a wealthy family, not from well-known people or et cetera like that, but because of my skin, they say I get certain things. Maybe, maybe not. I see this a lot in relationship to people in New York City from a variety of different countries and how they speak and work with other countries. Like, oh, you have that accent, you're from this area, and etc. I see that with how people from India are treated at certain fast food places in the area and how they're spoken down to and treated by quote-unquote other minority groups in the area. And there is an importance to culture. There is an importance to understanding how culture shapes us and how we convey that culture and what are the issues with that culture and et cetera. Because there's no such thing as a perfect culture. There's no such thing as sort of the quote-unquote noble savage and all that sort of, twisting and anachronistic visions of history in order to bring about certain understandings in relationship to how terrible and nasty the Western culture is and et cetera. But in this reality, there's no such thing as a perfect culture, because we ourselves are not perfect. The importance of being able to always respond and treat people as individuals, even knowing that they come out of a culture and there might be certain things from that culture that they still themselves convey. Stereotypes always have a foundation of some level of truth, even though they are a caricature of that truth. We need to be aware of how destructive that can be when we suddenly lose the I of the person before us into the we of the group that we have understood them through, by, or in. And now suddenly, instead of seeing the face, we see the mob, even though there's only the individual standing there before us. And now suddenly, if we get the power, we're going to take back from this quote-unquote group things that we believe that they're entitled to because they did these wrong things, etc. It's a cycle of violence that goes through history over and over and over and over. Some group gets the power and oppresses those that have oppressed them, and etc. And it just seems to never end. The eye for the eye was supposed to stop that sort of stuff, because if that person just took one of your eyes, you only get to take one of their eyes. You don't get to take more than that. You don't get to up the ante and take their life. And this particular gentleman was really aware of that sort of avariceness for blood in relationship to the harm that people may feel, then take that harm and instead of applying to individuals that have done it, apply to the whole group in which those individuals are part of. And that sort of storm cloud is rising once again and gaining some real steam, particularly here in the United States, but I think in a variety of other countries of sort of the Western background. So I wanted to put this name out here, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. Look into him. Google, get some of his letters. I really like this book. Great footnotations, great breakdowns from a variety of other historians about this particular person. Those that are very favorable of this gentleman, others that are not very favorable of him. So it's a great balanced perspective, but it really gets to the heart of what this man saw and how his Catholic faith, his Catholic identity, his Catholic education allowed him to become a man that was so needed for his times, and to the point that he was even able to protect the people from their very selves, from the destructiveness of a mob, when it is given a sort of a liberalness, an unfettered command of a democratic government. He just might makes right in that regard. So I'm a little excited because I really enjoyed this book, and I've really enjoyed looking at this gentleman, particularly as I get to know a little bit more about the Catholic history here in the United States. His cousin, I should say, John Carroll, was the first bishop here in the United States. So this is American Cicero by the Life of Charles Carroll. The gentleman's name is Charles Carroll of Carrollton. You can look up the Declaration of Independence and see his signature right there with the name of his town. Legend has it that, he was mocked because there was a lot of Carrolls, so he put where he was from, but he was already sort of signing his name in that way. So, whether it's true or not, it's still very interesting of the fellow. But he was really tied in and had great love and admiration for George Washington and Ben Franklin, and just corresponding, even those that had very anti-Catholic sentiment, just saw the virtue of this man, and it opened themselves up to responding to him and taking what he had to say instead of just becoming blind because he was a Catholic. And he was able to break through that because of the virtuousness of his life. So look him up. Maybe he can help us during our times right now by offering us an insight into what we can bring to the table as Catholics from our tradition to aid people, to keep us from going down this very dangerous, slippery slope of what people call sort of identity politics, of sliding into sort of this destructiveness of this group versus that group, and all the power dynamics that go involved in that. And there's a reason that justice is supposed to be blind, and why we have to work for that for a variety of reasons. But I'll bring this video to an end. So thank you very much for being with me as I speak about an amazing man that I've just grown with much admiration for over these last few months. And know that I'm with you. Know that I'm praying for you. May God continue to bless you. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you very much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed this little video I made for you all. If you like what I'm doing here on this YouTube channel, please make sure to click that little subscribe button down below and that little bell icon. That way you stay up to date with everything I'm doing on this particular channel. And if you want to keep the conversation going, leave a comment down below or head on over to Twitter. My Twitter handle is @CarmeliteNick. Or you can go over to my Facebook page, The Real Friar, and these are two great resources to stay up to date with everything I'm doing in the land of Carmel. Thanks again. Know that I'll be praying for you.